The title of my paper is From Sufferers to Activists with a question mark. Then Israeli and Palestinian women talk on war, bereavement, and peace, and it focuses on Israeli and Palestinian women aggrieved and bereaved by war and the potential, and I must emphasize the word potential, role as peace activists. My paper rests on 6 assumptions. 1, because of the unique status in the societies, these women will be able to influence public opinion on peace and security matters. 2, the majority of women who were victimized by war opt for reconciliation rather than vengeance. 3, the inclusion of women in peacemaking will remedy the chronic absence from peace processes, thereby confirming a number of United Nations resolutions, which I have no time to go to. 4, a link between personal experience and political activism does exist, and there are many of examples which I have no time to go through. However, this activism is the exception rather than a norm. Therefore, my 5th assumption is that because of social pressures that often exist in societies that are plagued by prolonged war and conflict, women are reluctant to transform their experience into political activism. Such pressures include a siege mentality in many of these societies, a widespread admiration for the military, support for armed struggles, or simply being caught between their obligation to the state and their duty to themselves as women. The subject of war and women and war has captivated a growing number of theorists and social scientists since the 1980s. However, until very recently, the subject of bereavement of women or the suffering of women by war and conflict has been neglected. This neglect or oversight reflects neither the sacrifices these women have made for their nations nor the potential leverage in their societies. A link between feminism and peace has long been established. Initially, the connection between the two related or correlated the peaceful character of women or the nature, the female nature of women, the nurturing nature to peace. I don't think that that is true. Therefore, my 6, although women are nurturing, but my 6th assumption then is that it is not their nurturing nature that motivates women to seek peace, but the rejection of the social conditioning on the one hand, and on the other hand, the demand for accountability and justice. Using the Arab-Israeli conflict as a case study with the support of a Fulbright scholarship in 1995-96, I must emphasize before the current Intifada, my study does not include victims of the current Intifada, I conducted interviews with 30 Israeli Jewish women, 28 actually Jewish women, 2 Druze women, and 8 Palestinian women, the latter in the territories with the help of a Palestinian assistant. The purpose of my interviews was to examine whether women directly affected by conflict and war believe that they have a special role to play as peacemakers. Other question that I was interested in was whether these women consider themselves as victims of their own state policies, how do they view the counterparts in the other society, and whether common experiences, do they believe that their common experiences on both sides can be used as a tool for reconciliation? More than anything, I wanted to give these women a voice. Now, before revealing the data that I collected, let me just caution the audience that this is not a scientific study. The people that I interviewed do not represent, the women that I interviewed do not represent either societies. My study focuses on a very narrow segment of a society of which I reached few people, few of whom really wanted to talk to me. Of the 30 Israeli women I interviewed, 28 were Jewish, as I said, 28 were Jewish, 2 were Druze. The youngest was 28 years old, the oldest was 88 years old. 15 were war widows, 4 were bereaved mothers, 3 were bereaved sisters. 2 women were orphans. 1 woman was a widow of a war-disabled veteran. She had to take care of him most of her adult life. 1 was a disabled female veteran, a paraplegic since the end of 19. 1 was a mother of a soldier who has been missing in action since 1982, and 1 was the mother of a war-disabled veterans. They range from the war, the 1948 war to 1967, 1973, 1982, a number of military actions that are related to the Arab-Israeli conflict, and the first Intifada. And I have more details of the women, but I have no time to share it with you. Now, based on the experience, the personal experience of this woman, most of the respondents believe that women suffer the consequences of war in a different way than men do. Widows, for example, contend in Israel that the Israeli society sets much more stringent standards of behavior for them compared to widowers. Others explain the different behavior of men and women in contrasting roles of the two sexes in national war efforts. Men are usually engaged in war planning and in actual fighting, having no time, chance, or natural inclination to worry about life back home. Females, on the other hand, are left with in the rear to carry all civilian responsibilities in addition to worry about the loved ones in the front. Almost all of the respondents maintain that women are emotionally stronger than men. Most interviewees thought that a number of Israeli women involved in decision-making on military and security issues was not only disturbingly low, but that the participation could change the essence of such decisions. Most were also convinced that the role in Israel's nation and existential struggle was not different from that of the male members of a society, even if such a role assumed a different pattern than that of men. More women maintained that their sacrifice resulting from war had no special meaning compared to those who thought that such sacrifice were particularly meaningful because of the sense of patriotism or because of the national honor accorded to them by the sacrifice. While many challenged the very notion of the need to sacrifice human life for any idea, including the idea of statehood, those who were victimized in 1948 and 1967 did not question the laws. They said we had no choice. That was hardly surprising, since most Israelis perceived both wars as wars survival in comparing to other subsequent wars. Because of the unique agonizing experience, these women tend to view ordinary daily occurrences as trivial, often resulting in their own isolation, real or perceived. Usually the degree of seclusion corresponds to the level of bereavement. Thus, while most women believed that they were an integral part of the Israeli society, even when constituting a very distinct group, bereaved mothers felt especially secluded. Noticeably, women who had never met one another used an identical language to describe the type of isolation. For example, they used the term of contagious diseases. The rest of society is afraid to deal with us because sometimes we are diseased and this is contagious, and they cross to the other side of the street when they see us walking. Whereas only 3 of the 30 women interviewed were politically active, all described themselves as politically aware. Generally, ideological identification remained rather consistent, with most women adhering to the same political view they had held prior to the incident of loss or injury and supporting the same policies. The few who changed their views were equally divided among those who shifted from left to right and vice versa as a result of the personal experience. On the main, ideological affiliation remained constant even after the national trauma resulting from the murder of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in November 1995. More than merely adhering to the previous ideas, most women felt stronger about them. One should expect, however, that the current violence caused many to switch the moderate ideas to more radical ones, and I presume that such shift would reverse again once violence drops to an acceptable level. Confidence-building measures are taken by either side, and the peace process resumes. And in spite of everything that is going on, I'm optimistic. Almost all of those interviewed thought that women with similar experiences were able to influence public opinion on war and peace issues, as opposed to education, status of women, and other traditionally women issues. Yet some of those who believed that they had potential influence to shape public opinion on these issues were unable to correlate between such influence and their ability to affect the Arab-Israeli peace process or the essence of an eventual peace. Still, nearly two-thirds concluded that women affected by war have a special role to play as peacemakers in the conflict in which the societies were involved. They also believed that they were able to influence peace processes. The source of the potential influence was a unique experience, and they believed that women generally desire peace more than men do, and that they are more result-oriented than men. But when asked whether they were able to influence the political process itself or the type of peace that will ultimately result from the process, only about 1/4 of those interviews were confident that they could do so. The rest were nearly evenly divided among those who were uncertain about the ability of women to do so, and those who were convinced that they were unable to influence the type of an anticipated peace. The same two-thirds who embraced their role as peacemakers also thought that shared memories of past violence could inspire reconciliation. That was a very important point between the two societies. Only a third believed that memories of past victimization has no role to play at all, or rather may be not relevant or worsen the situation or the attempts at peace. I have to go to the Palestinian side now, even though there is much more to say about the Israeli side, because I have only 2 minutes less now. Unlike many Israeli women who questioned the need for sacrifice human life even for the sake of the state, Palestinian women approved of such sacrifice in the name of the national struggle, viewing it as martyrdom. Thus, all but one referred to her husband as a martyr, his eternal glory translating into honor and respect in society. As a rule, they did not criticize the Palestinian Authority for the suffering, but 100% blame on the Israeli military. I have much more. Let me go back. I interviewed, as I said, 8 Palestinian women were interviewed. The youngest was 24, the oldest was in the 40s. 3 were from Ramallah in the West Bank, 3 others were from Hebron, and 2 were from the Jabalia refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. All were widowed. Some were widowed from the Intifada, and few were widowed in the Hebron massacre in 1994. The answer confirmed the fact that a primary concern is the end of the Israeli occupation, the most burdensome aspect of which is the existence of Jewish settlements in the midst of Palestinian territory. Since occupation is the single most important obstacle to peace activities involving mutual trust can begin, according to them, only after the occupation will end. Like the Israeli counterparts, they believe that women suffer from war in a different way than men, and they cite the very same thing that the Israeli women cited. They also believe that women were stronger than men, and that their role in the national struggle was equal to that of men, even if it takes a different form. All claim to be politically aware. One woman was a long-time member in Hebron Women Association for Peace. Well, there's much more to say about that, and perhaps tomorrow I'll have a chance to add more to it. Thank you.